The air in Tupelo, Mississippi always felt thick to young Elvis Presley, thick with heat, thick with the scent of pine and dust, and sometimes thick with worry. He was a quiet kid, skinny and often lost in his own thoughts. Thoughts that rarely had much to do with the dusty roads or the small, simple house he lived in. His real world, the one that truly captured his imagination, was a secret. It lived folded neatly in his worn satchel, hidden beneath his bed, or clutched tight in his hands whenever he could steal a moment away. These weren't just any books, they were comic books. Brightly colored pages filled with impossible heroes and terrifying villains, with cities that glittered and stars that exploded, while other kids were outside playing stickball or chasing chickens. Elvis was deep in the pages of Captain Marvel adventures, watching Billy Batson shout, "Shazam!" and transform into the mightiest mortal. Or he was with Superman, soaring above Metropolis, a blur of red and blue, saving innocence from daring fates. His mother Gladys sometimes found him sprawled on the floor, chin propped on his hand, utterly mesmerized. She'd smile softly, a little wistfully. She knew her boy had a vivid imagination, a gentle soul, and a way of escaping into his own worlds. She didn't quite understand the appeal of men in capes and tights, but if it brought a quiet joy to her son, she was all for it. "Reading again, son?" she'd ask, her voice soft as a lullaby. Elvis would just nod, his eyes still glued to a panel. "He's fighting the monsters, Mama," he'd whisper, as if sharing a sacred secret. "He's so strong." The local drugstore was his sanctuary. Old Mr. Henderson, who ran the place, knew Elvis by name. He'd seen the boy's eyes light up every time a new stack of comics arrived. Sometimes, if a comic was a little dog-eared, Mr. Henderson would let Elvis have it for a nickel less, or even let him read it by the candy counter for a few minutes, provided he didn't smudge the panel, every speech bubble he didn't. Just read the stories, he lived them. He'd stand in front of the cracked mirror in his bedroom, trying to mimic Superman's heroic stance. Shoulders back, chin slightly up, hands on his hips. He'd imagine the wind rushing through his hair as he took off, or the sheer force of a punch that could stop a speeding train. When Captain Marvel flexed his muscles, Elvis would try to do the same, though his scrawny arms weren't quite up to the task. Batman, with his dark cape and brooding intensity, fascinated him too. Batman wasn't about superpowers. He was about intellect and determination, a man who had chosen to become something more. Elvis, being a shy kid, understood the idea of putting on a different persona, a stronger version of yourself, to face the world. He loved the vibrant colors, the dynamic lines, the way the artists made movement seem to leap off the page. But more than that, he loved the spirit of it all. These heroes were brave, they stood up for what was right. They protected the weak. In a world that often felt uncertain and a little scary, these characters offered a clear path, a beacon of hope. They taught him that even if you felt small, you could still dream of being mighty. He wasn't aware of it then, but these quiet moments, spent lost in fantastic worlds, were planting seeds deep within him. Seeds of showmanship, of courage, of a yearning to be larger than life. He didn't know he would one day stand before thousands, a microphone clutched in his hand, moving with the same dynamic energy he saw on the comic book pages. He didn't know that the shy boy from Tupelo would one day become a hero to millions, his movements and his presence echoing the very heroes he so admired in his secret stash. For now, he was just Elvis, a boy and his comics, dreaming of a world where anyone, even a boy like him, could be extraordinary. One afternoon, reading a worn copy of Whiz Comics, Elvis came across a panel of Captain Marvel soaring into action, his red cape billowing behind him, a determined look on his face. Elvis traced the lines of the cape with his finger, feeling a strange flutter in his chest. It wasn't just a piece of cloth. It was a symbol of power, of flight, of daring. He closed his eyes, imagining himself wrapped in such a garment, no longer just Elvis Presley, but something more. The image stuck with him, a powerful unspoken desire for that kind of dramatic flourish. It was more than just a dream. It was a feeling, a deep-seated belief that one day he too could capture that kind of awe-inspiring presence. Comics weren't just stories. They were blueprints for a future he hadn't yet dared to imagine. Moving to Memphis felt like a whole new world for Elvis, bustling and full of strange noises. But even in the bigger city, some things remained the same. He still loved his comic books, his quiet escape. He'd hum along to gospel tunes, practice chords on his guitar, and listen to the blues on the radio. His voice a low rumble that surprised even himself, but performing in front of people. That was a different story, entirely. Friends would try to talk him into signing up, knowing he had a knack for music. "Come on, Elvis, just get up there and sing that Hank Williams tune," they'd urge. But a cold knot of fear would twist in his stomach. His hands would feel clammy, his throat tight. He'd imagine all those eyes staring, all those whispers. All that judgment. The stage lights would feel like spotlights of doom. He couldn't do it. The shy kid, the one who found comfort in the imagined might of subterrors, crumpled at the thought of actual performance. One day, his music teacher, Miss Marable, announced a school talent contest. She looked directly at Elvis, a knowing smile on her face. "Elvis, I know you have a voice. Why don't you give it a try?" He mumbled something, looking down at his shoes, his face turning crimson. The thought of standing alone on that stage, just him and his guitar, was paralyzing. He was no Superman, no Captain Marvel. He was just Elvis, and Elvis got nervous. That night, he couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, the image of the stage looming in his mind. He reached for a comic book. A tattered copy of Action Comics he'd probably read 100 times. He opened to a page where Superman was facing down a giant robot. Superman looked strong, unyielding, even a little defiant. He wasn't just powerful, he was confident. He knew what he had to do, and he did it. Elvis stared at the panel. Superman wasn't hiding. He wasn't afraid. He was putting himself out there, facing down danger for a greater purpose. What was his purpose? To sing, to share the music that resonated so deeply within him. But how could he find that heroic courage? He remembered a particular panel from Captain Marvel where Billy Batson transforms. What if he wasn't just Elvis up there? What if he could be something more? Not a superhero with powers. No, but someone who acted like one. Someone who channeled that kind of bravery and charisma. The next day he walked into the music room, his heart pounding, but with a new determination. "Miss Marable," he said, his voice a little shaky. "I'll sign up for the talent show," she beamed. "That's wonderful, Elvis. What will you sing?" He'd chosen a slow ballad, Old Shep. It was a sad, sweet song, something familiar and comforting. But as the day of the talent show approached, the fear returned. He practiced in his room, singing to his reflection, imagining the audience as a friendly crowd of comic book characters cheering him on. When his name was called, the fear hit him like a physical blow. His legs felt like jelly. He walked to the microphone, the stage lights blinding him, the faces in the audience blurred into an intimidating sea. He strummed a hesitant chord. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a split second, and in his mind he shouted, "Shazam!" It wasn't a literal transformation, of course, but something shifted inside him. He opened his eyes, and instead of seeing a judging crowd, he saw the blurry outline of his own heroic ideal. He wasn't just Elvis. He was the performer, the one who had to be brave, the one who had to deliver. He started to sing. His voice, at first a little shaky, grew stronger. With each note he swayed slightly, a natural rhythm beginning to emerge. He didn't just sing the song, he felt it. He poured his whole heart into it, just like a hero pouring their strength into saving the day. He wasn't shaking from nerves anymore. He was moving with the music. He won second prize that day, a small victory maybe, but a huge one for Elvis. He had conquered his fear. He had found a spark, a way to channel the confidence he admired in his comic book. Heroes. He realized that the stage wasn't a place of terror but a canvas. And he, Elvis, could paint a picture of strength and passion just like the heroes he read about. The seed planted long ago in Tupelo had finally begun to sprout. He'd found his secret weapon, the ability to become the hero he needed to be. After that first hesitant step onto the stage, something clicked for Elvis. He hadn't completely shed his shyness, but he'd found a way to manage it, to transform it. The idea of channeling his inner hero became his secret weapon, a little trick he played on himself. When he stepped into the light, he wasn't just Elvis. He was taking on a role, a persona. He started playing local clubs and juke joints with his new bandmates, Scotty Moore on guitar and Bill Black on bass. They were raw, energetic, and unlike anything else happening in Memphis. Elvis would stand there feeling the music thump through him, and his body would start to move. At first it was subtle, a little shake of his leg, a swivel of his hips. But it wasn't just random movement. It was infused with the dynamic energy he'd absorbed from his comic books. He thought of the powerful stances of Superman, legs braced ready for anything. He thought of Captain Marvel's agile leaps and powerful thrusts. He imagined the way characters would burst into action full of kinetic energy. He wasn't consciously copying poses, but the feeling of those movements, the sense of power and readiness, became part of his performance. One night, during a particularly wild guitar solo by Scotty, Elvis found himself leaning back, microphone clutched tight, his legs shaking with the rhythm. A girl in the audience screamed. Not just a polite clap, but a full-throated, excited shriek. Elvis blinked, surprised. He hadn't meant to do anything special, but the reaction was undeniable. He realized then that his movements, which felt so natural to him, were electrifying to others. He started to experiment. He'd spin the microphone, stand like a powerful weapon, not quite a ray gun, but an extension of his own force. He'd fall into a crouch, then spring up almost like a hero leaping into action. His famous leg, shaking, the rubber legs people called them, wasn't just nervous energy. It was a rhythmic pulse, a visible manifestation, much like the visible auras or speed trails that followed subtours in their adventures. "What in tarnation are you doing up there, Elvis?" Scotty would chuckle after a particularly energetic set. "Folks ain't ever seen anything like it." Elvis would just grin, a little sheepishly Elvis. "Just feeling the music, Scotty," he'd say. But in his mind he knew it was more. He was becoming the music, transforming into something larger than life, just as his heroes did. He loved the dramatic flair. When he'd step forward, guitar in hand, he'd often strike a pose, chin up, eyes gazing out at the audience as if surveying a city he was about to save. His pompadour, slicked back and shiny, added to the heroic silhouette, almost like a helmet or a crown. Even the way he held the microphone, sometimes two-handed like a powerful staff, had a certain dramatic weight to it. The music itself, a wild blend of country, blues, and gospel, was the perfect soundtrack for his evolving persona. It was raw, rebellious, and full of a youthful energy that mirrored the daring adventures in his comics. When he sang songs like "That's All Right" or "Mystery Train," he wasn't just singing the lyrics. He was embodying the wild, untamed spirit of a hero breaking free. People didn't understand why he moved the way he did. Some were scandalized, calling it vulgar, but most were mesmerized. They couldn't take their eyes off him. He was like a living, breathing comic book character, exploding with energy and charisma. He was electric. He learned to use the stage as his arena, the audience as his world. His movements were not choreographed in the traditional sense. They were spontaneous, driven by the music and by that deep-seated inspiration from his comic book heroes. He was a force of nature, a dynamic spectacle, a hero in the making. He started incorporating dramatic pauses, moments where he'd stand perfectly still, staring out at the crowd, letting the anticipation build before bursting back into action. It was the same kind of tension and release found in a comic book panel right before a hero unleashes a powerful blow. He understood pacing drama and how to command attention without saying a word. The crowds grew larger, the screams louder. Elvis Presley was no longer just a shy kid from Tupelo. He was a phenomenon. And much of that phenomenon was born from the quiet moments he spent with his secret stash of comic books, dreaming of being a hero, then finding a way to bring that dream to life, one powerful movement at a time. The stage was his Gotham, his metropolis, and he was its newest, most electrifying hero. By the mid-1950s, Elvis Presley was no longer a local sensation. He was a national phenomenon. The gimmick born from his comic book dreams had exploded onto the American stage, redefining what a performer could be. His appearances on television were legendary, sparking both adoration and controversy. And with his growing fame came the opportunity to truly embrace his heroic persona. Not just in movement, but in appearance too. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was a shrewd businessman. He saw the captivating energy of Elvis, the way he mesmerized audiences, and knew it was pure gold. He might not have understood the subtle comic book inspirations, but he certainly understood the power of a larger-than-life image. One of the most iconic symbols of Elvis's early fame was the gold-laned suit, custom-made and glittering like a suit of armor. When Elvis first put it on, he didn't just see a fancy suit. He saw a costume, a modern-day superhero uniform. It wasn't just fashion, it was a statement. It screamed power, uniqueness, and undeniable star quality. It was his first true supersuit, a shining testament to the heroic image he projected. He wasn't just dressed in gold, he was glowing with the aura of a champion. On stage, his movements became even more pronounced, more confident. He'd stride across the stage, a commanding presence, every bit as powerful as Superman making a grand entrance. He'd tilt his head, a coy smile playing on his lips, then suddenly burst into a flurry of moves. The leg shakes, the hip swivels, the dramatic dips and turns. These weren't just dance moves, they were power moves, gestures of strength and charisma that felt like they were ripped straight from a comic book panel. When he held the microphone, it wasn't just an instrument, it was his emblem, his symbol of power. He'd lean into it, almost confiding in it, then pull back, using it to punctuate his words, or swing it dramatically, a flourish that was part showmanship, part superhero theatric. He used it to connect, to dominate, to control the energy of the room. His stage presence was magnetic. He'd work the crowd with his eyes a playful smirk, then a sudden burst of raw passion. He was constantly moving a blur of energy, embodying the kinetic force of a hero in action. His profile, especially when he sang into the microphone, his head tilted back, became instantly recognizable, the heroic profile etched into the minds of millions. It was the stance of a conqueror, of someone absolutely in control of his moment. The screams of the fans were like a roar of approval. A city celebrating its hero. Girls would faint, boys would try to copy his moves. He was performing power. He was the embodiment of youthful rebellion and boundless energy. A living, breathing fantasy figure. Even his famous sneer, the slight curl of his lip, wasn't just an expression. It carried an edge, a playful defiance that could be seen in the eyes of a confident superhero facing down a lesser villain. It was a sign that he knew his power, and he wasn't afraid to use it. Posed for photographs with a natural flair for drama, often striking poses that mirrored classic heroic stances, chest out, shoulders back, a hand on his hip, or reaching out to the audience. He understood instinctively how to create an iconic image, just like the splash pages in his beloved comics. Every photo was a potential cover, every performance a potential origin story. Elvis wasn't just singing songs. He was telling a story with his entire body, a story of excitement, passion, and undeniable strength. He was a hero to the rock and roll generation, a symbol of freedom and youthful exuberance. He made it cool to be different, to break the mold. And beneath the glittering suits, the powerful voice, and the mesmerizing moves, was the quiet boy who had once dreamed of soaring like Superman, of commanding attention like Captain Marvel. The golden age of comic books had found its parallel on stage in the form of Elvis Presley. He had taken his private dreams and unleashed them on the world, proving that heroes didn't just exist on paper. They could walk among us, shake their hips, and sing their hearts out, leaving an unforgettable mark on history. He was the real-life hero of rock and roll, and his influence would echo through generations, a testament to the power of imagination. Beneath the dazzling stage lights and the heroic persona, Elvis Presley was still the kind, sensitive boy from Tupelo. His love for comic books wasn't just about the flashy moves and the powerful image. It was also deeply rooted in the values these heroes represented. Justice, kindness, protecting the innocent, standing up for what's right. These were core tenets of the comic book universe, and they deeply resonated with Elvis. He was famously generous, often to a fault. Stories of his kindness are countless. He'd buy cars for strangers, help out friends in need, or anonymously pay the medical bills of someone struggling. This wasn't just about having money, it was about an inherent sense of responsibility, a belief that with great power, or in his case, great fame and fortune, came great responsibility. It was the Spider-Man principle, long before it was widely known. He carried a deep respect for law enforcement and military personnel, often inviting police officers and soldiers to his shows and giving them gifts. He saw them as real-life heroes, the everyday men and women who protected society, much like the costume figures he admired. He loved collecting badges, and would even carry one himself, feeling a kinship with those who served. It wasn't just a quirky hobby, it was a genuine admiration for their duty and sacrifice. One Christmas, a young fan wrote to Elvis, explaining her family was struggling and might not have much for the holidays. Elvis didn't just send a signed photo. He had his people deliver a truckload of gifts, food, and even paid a few months of their rent. He did things like that all the time, quietly, without seeking publicity. For him, it wasn't about the accolades. It was about doing what was right. Much like a hero operating in the shadows, helping those in need. He had a strong moral compass. He often spoke about loyalty, respect, and doing the right thing. He hated bullies and injustice. If he saw someone being mistreated, whether a friend or a stranger, his gentle nature could quickly shift to a protective, almost fierce stance. He had a natural instinct to defend, to make things right, mirroring the unwavering resolve of his favorite characters. He genuinely wanted to use his platform, his fame, for good. His personal life, though complex, was also marked by a desire to bring happiness to those around him. He built a close-knit group of friends and family around him known as the Memphis Mafia, and he genuinely cared for their well-being. He was their leader, yes, but also their protector, ensuring they were looked after much like a hero leading their team. He loved animals, especially dogs and horses, and would lavish them with care and affection. This gentle side, the empathy for creatures great and small, was another facet of his heroic heart. It showed a deep capacity for love and nurturing qualities, often found in the most compassionate of comic book heroes. Even when faced with overwhelming fame and the sometimes harsh glare of the public eye, Elvis tried to maintain a sense of integrity. He often felt a burden of expectation, the pressure to always be Elvis, the superhero of rock and roll. But even under that pressure, his core values, instilled partly by his family, partly by his faith, and certainly by the unwavering moral code of his beloved heroes, remained intact. He didn't just play a hero on stage. He lived with a hero's heart offstage. His acts of kindness, his unwavering loyalty, his desire to do good in the world were all reflections of the values he had absorbed from countless hours spent in the fantastical worlds of Metropolis and Fawcett City. He showed that being a hero wasn't just about flying or fighting villains. It was about using your strength, whatever form it took, to make the world a little better. One act of kindness at a time. Elvis Presley was not just the king of rock and roll. He was a gentle giant with a true hero's heart, always ready to lend a helping hand, just like the caped crusaders he admired so deeply. As the 1960s turned into the 1970s, Elvis's career took a new turn. After a period away from live performances, focusing on movies, he made a triumphant return to the stage, most notably in Las Vegas. This era marked the birth of another iconic element of his stage persona, the elaborate jumpsuits. And for Elvis, these weren't just costumes, they were his modern suits of armor, his updated super-tier uniforms, complete with capes. The early jumpsuits were simpler, but they quickly grew more ornate, shimmering with sequins, studs, and intricate embroidery. Designed by Bill Belu and later by others, these suits became synonymous with the Las Vegas Elvis. Each one was a masterpiece, carefully crafted to allow for movement while making a powerful visual statement. When Elvis stepped onto that stage in Vegas, bathed in spotlights, wearing a massive flared jumpsuit, he was a spectacle. He moved with incredible fluidity, his martial arts training adding a new grace and power to his movements. The jumpsuits, with their wide legs and flowing sleeves, exaggerated his every move, making him appear even larger, even more dynamic. It was as if he had been drawn by a comic book artist, every line and contour designed to emphasize his heroic form. Capes were a direct, undeniable nod to his lifelong fascination. They started off relatively small, but quickly grew in size and drama. When Elvis would spread his arms wide, the cape would billow behind him, a magnificent sweep of fabric that instantly brought to mind Superman taking flight or Batman swooping down. From the rooftops, he knew the power of that visual. He wasn't just wearing a cape, he was performing with it, using its movement to add drama and flair to his songs. He would often strike a pose at the end of a song, his arms outstretched, the cape forming a perfect, majestic backdrop. It was a classic, heroic silhouette, frozen for a moment, letting the applause wash over him. This wasn't just an accident, it was a deliberate choice, an instinctive understanding of how to project power and charisma. He was consciously creating iconic moments, just like the legendary splash pages in comic books that depict a hero in their full glory. Each jumpsuit had a name or a theme: the American Eagle, the Dragon Suit, the Red Lion. They weren't just clothes, they were identities, extensions of his persona. They were his armor against the world, allowing him to embody the strength and confidence of his inner hero. When he put on one of those suits, he wasn't just Elvis Presley the man. He was Elvis the King, the performer, the living legend. The high collars and broad shoulders of the jumpsuits also added to his powerful silhouette, giving him an almost architectural presence on stage. He was a force, an icon, a larger-than-life figure who commanded every inch of the stage and every eye in the audience. The suits were perfectly designed for the expansive Vegas showrooms, allowing him to be seen and appreciated from every angle. Even the accessories, the rings, the chains, the scarves he tossed to adoring fans, they were all part of the theatricality. They were like the various gadgets and tools a superhero might carry, each with its own purpose in the grand performance. Elvis understood that entertainment was visual as much as it was auditory. He wasn't content to just stand there and sing. He wanted to give the audience a spectacle, an experience that transcended a simple concert. He wanted them to feel the same sense of awe and excitement he felt when reading about his heroes. And with his magnificent jumpsuits and billowing capes, he achieved it. He was a living, breathing, singing superhero, performing feats of vocal and physical prowess, leaving audiences stunned and screaming for more. His influence was so profound, his image so indelible, that even today the sight of a sequined jumpsuit with a cape immediately brings to mind the one and only king. It was his ultimate heroic costume, and he wore it with unparalleled majesty. While the jumpsuits and capes projected an image of invincible power, being Elvis was also an immense burden. Comic book persona, the larger-than-life hero he created, became not just a way to perform, but also a shield. Beneath the dazzling sequins and the commanding stage presence, Elvis was still a human being with fears, anxieties, and moments of profound loneliness. The pressure was immense. Every performance had to be perfect. Every move had to be electric. Millions of eyes were constantly on him, expecting the king to always be on, always spectacular, always in control. It was exhausting. He couldn't just have an off night. Elvis couldn't have an off night. Sometimes, backstage before a show, the old stage fright would creep back, a ghost from his Memphis school days. The roar of the crowd, instead of being invigorating, could feel like a monstrous demand. In those moments, he might close his eyes, take a deep breath, and in his mind, he'd once again channel that internal strength he'd learned from his heroes. He had to put on the persona, don the metaphorical cape, and become the hero his audience expected. Comic book characters he admired faced impossible odds, but they always found a way to win. They pushed through pain, through fear, through exhaustion. Elvis found himself doing the same. He might be battling a cold or feeling weary from touring or struggling with personal issues, but the moment he stepped into the light, the Elvis persona would kick in. The strength, the charisma, the tireless energy. It was all part of the act, a way to power through, to deliver the heroic performance. The jumpsuits, which looked so grand, were also incredibly heavy and hot under the intense stage lights, performing for hours. In them, moving with such energy was a physical marathon, but he wore them like armor, a necessary part of the transformation. They helped him shed the vulnerability of the man and step into the power of the legend. He often struggled with the isolation that came with fame. Everyone wanted a piece of Elvis, but few truly knew or understood Elvis the man. Constant adoration, while gratifying, also created a wall between him and the outside world. He was living in a kind of superhero bubble, protected and isolated by his own celebrity. Even his closest friends found it hard to break through the demands of his life. In his quieter moments, back at Graceland, he would sometimes shed the cape of the puppet persona and retreat. He'd find solace in his collection of comics, reading old issues, revisiting the clear-cut morality and uncomplicated heroism of those worlds. It was a way to ground himself, to remember the simpler dreams of a boy before the weight of the world pressed down so heavily. The vulnerability was real. The longing for normalcy, for a life outside the constant spotlight, was palpable. But the persona he had so carefully crafted, inspired by the very comics he loved, also served as a coping mechanism. It was how he navigated the incredible demands of his unique life, put on his suit of armor, and became the hero, not just for the audience, but for himself, to find the strength to face another day, another performance, another wave of expectations. He was a hero who battled not just external villains like bad reviews or declining record sales, but internal ones. Doubt, fatigue, and the immense pressure of living up to his own legend. And, like all true heroes, he kept fighting, kept performing, kept giving his all, even when the cape felt heavy, and the cheers felt like a distant echo. The vulnerability was there, but so was the unwavering spirit powered by a dream. That began with a shy boy and a stack of colorful comic books. Elvis Presley's influence wasn't just limited to his time. It rippled through generations, shaping music, fashion, and performance itself. He didn't just sing songs. He created a blueprint for what a rock and roll star could be. Larger than life, modic, and undeniably iconic. And the essence of his comic book-inspired persona became a fundamental part of that legacy. After his passing, the Elvis persona, the one that blended raw talent with heroic theatrics, continued to inspire. Musicians, actors, and performers studied his moves, his presence, his command of the stage. They might not have known about his secret comic book stash, but they instinctively understood the power of his dynamic, almost superhuman performance style. Think of the artists who came after him, the dramatic stage shows of the 70s and 80s, the flamboyant costumes, the performers who seemed to transcend mere humanity on stage. Many drew from the wellspring of energy and visual spectacle that Elvis had pioneered. He showed them that performance could be an art form, a gooding experience where the artist becomes something more than just a person with a microphone. His iconic images, the leg shake, the smear, the magnificent jumpsuits with billowing capes, became part of the global cultural consciousness. They were instantly recognizable symbols of power, coolness, and rebellion. He became a legend, a myth, a character as enduring as any superhero in a comic book. He transcended being just a singer. He became an archetype. He might not have explicitly told every young musician he met, "Hey, go read some Superman." But his performances, infused with that heroic energy, spoke volumes. He showed them how to own the stage, how to be fearless, how to project an almost superhuman aura. He taught them, through example, that a performer could be a hero, not just in their songs, but in their very presence. Imagine a young Michael Jackson watching Elvis on TV, mesmerized by the king's moves. While his own style was unique, the idea of a performer as a captivating, almost otherworldly figure certainly found fertile ground in Jackson's imagination. Or consider a stadium rock band whose lead singer commands thousands with a single gesture. That sense of epic scale of being a heroic figure to a massive crowd was certainly something Elvis mastered. Even in quieter moments, Elvis might have inadvertently passed on his love. He was known for his impromptu performances at Graceland, for sharing his passions with those around him. Perhaps a young Lisa Marie or one of his many cousins might have seen him engrossed in a comic and felt curious picking one up for themselves. The love for stories, for heroism, for the power of imagination could be contagious. His music also carried a heroic undertone. Songs about resilience, love, and overcoming hardship, such as "If I Can Dream" or "My Way," weren't just personal anthems. They resonated with the universal struggles and triumphs that heroes face. He sang with a passion that felt like a rallying cry, inspiring listeners to find their own strength. The legacy of Elvis is a testament to the power of a dream, even one born from something as seemingly simple as comic books. He showed that if you could imagine yourself as something more, something stronger, something bolder, you could truly become it on a stage. He didn't just pass on a musical style. He passed on a philosophy of performance, a way of being. He showed future generations that you didn't need superpowers to be a hero. You just needed courage, charisma, and a whole lot of heart, and sometimes a fantastic costume and a really good cape. He cemented the idea that a performer could be an icon, a larger-than-life figure who continues to inspire long after the final curtain call. He truly passed on, the torch igniting the imaginations of countless performers who would follow in his heroic footsteps. While the world knew Elvis as the dazzling performer, the king of rock and roll, few had access to his most private sanctuary, Graceland. And within Graceland, behind a grand facade and bustling activity, lay a quiet, personal space where Elvis could truly be himself and where his lifelong love for comic books continued to thrive. His comic book collection wasn't just a nostalgic pile. It was extensive, carefully organized, and a source of genuine comfort and joy. In his study or personal reading room, tucked away from the constant demands of his career, he had shelves filled with issues, old and new. He wasn't just interested in the golden age heroes of his youth. He kept up with new characters, new storylines. He was a true fan. Imagine Elvis, after a grueling tour or a long day of meetings, shedding his fancy clothes, putting on a comfortable robe and settling into an armchair with a stack of comics. The world of celebrity, the pressures, the loneliness, all of it could fade away as he plunged back into the adventures of Superman, Batman, or Captain Marvel. Here, he wasn't the king. He was just Elvis, the boy from Tupelo lost in a world of fantasy. His daughter Lisa Marie often spoke about seeing him read. She might have curled up next to him, curious about the colorful pages, perhaps even picking up a comic herself. For Elvis, it was a way to reconnect with his inner child, with the dreams that had shaped him. It was a space where imagination was king, a place where he didn't have to be on. He probably analyzed the art, the storytelling, the way heroes were depicted. He understood the visual language of comics because he had in many ways brought that language to life on stage. The dramatic angles, the powerful poses, the sense of motion, captured on a static page, he had spent years perfecting how to embody those very elements. Graceland itself, with its eclectic decor and sprawling grounds, was a reflection of Elvis's unique personality and imagination. It was a kind of personal fortress, a headquarters for his own superhero team, the Memphis Mafia. He had built a world around him that allowed him to express himself freely, even if the world outside was constantly scrutinizing. His love for Septerize wasn't just about escape, it was about values. He continued to admire their unwavering moral compass, their dedication to justice. These were principles he tried to live by even as the complexities of his life grew. His private reading moments were a reminder of those simpler, clearer ideals. Sometimes he might have even drawn inspiration from a new comic for a stage move or a costume idea. The artists were constantly pushing boundaries, creating new visual spectacles. Elvis, ever the innovator, would surely have appreciated that, perhaps even using a new comic as a springboard for his own creative direction. Capes on his jumpsuits weren't just for show, they were a direct, heartfelt tribute to the flying heroes he adored. His private sanctum at Graceland was more than just a home. It was the genesis and the recharge station for the Elvis phenomenon. It was where the man and the myth intertwined, where the quiet boy who loved comics found the strength and inspiration to become the most electrifying performer the world had ever seen. In those quiet rooms, surrounded by his heroes, Elvis could truly be free, lost in the pages that had always offered him the greatest adventure of all, the power of imagination. He understood that even the greatest heroes needed a secret hideout, a place to simply be. And for Elvis, that place was always Graceland, with a comic book in hand. Elvis Presley. The name itself still sparks something in the air, a sense of electric energy, enduring charisma, and undeniable legend. He passed away decades ago, but his presence, his music, and his iconic style remain as vivid and powerful as ever. And at the heart of that lasting legacy lies the quiet boy from Tupelo, whose love for comic books unexpectedly shaped the greatest performer of a generation. He didn't just sing songs. He embodied a spirit. He brought the dynamism, the drama, and the inherent goodness of his beloved superheroes to the stage. He was the living, breathing manifestation of a comic book hero, from the powerful stances of Superman to the agile moves of Captain Marvel, from the dramatic flair of his capes to the shining suits of armor. He wasn't just imitating, he was internalizing, transforming the essence of heroism into pure, unforgettable performance. Elvis broke down barriers, both musically and culturally. He showed the world that a performer could be more than just a voice. They could be a force of nature, a visual spectacle, an icon. He infused rock and roll with a theatricality that changed live music forever. His influence stretches far beyond music, touching fashion, pop culture, and the very idea of what a superstar could be. He taught us that imagination is a powerful thing. The shy kid who once hid behind the pages of Whiz Comics found the courage to step into the spotlight by imagining himself as something more, something stronger. He proved that dreams, no matter how fantastical, can be brought to life. He showed us how to find our inner hero, to channel that hidden strength and charisma when facing the big stage of life. His story is a testament to the idea that our passions, even the seemingly small or secret ones, can shape our destiny in profound ways. Who would have thought that a stack of colorful comic books could inspire the king of rock and roll? But for Elvis, those comics were more than just stories. They were a blueprint for a life lived boldly, heroically, and with an undeniable flair. Elvis Presley became a hero, not just in his performances, but in the enduring impact he had on millions. He provided an escape, an excitement, a soundtrack to countless lives. He made people feel alive, powerful, and free, much like a hero saving the day. His kindness, his generosity, his unwavering loyalty, these were the marks of a truly heroic heart nurtured by the simple, strong morals of the characters he admired. When you see an Elvis impersonator today, or hear his music on the radio, or watch an old clip of his electrifying performances, remember the quiet boy with the secret stash. Remember how he took the bold lines, the vibrant colors, the powerful narratives of those comic books, and poured them into every shake of his leg, every sweep of his hand, every magnificent twirl of his cape. Elvis Presley wasn't just a singer. He was a living, breathing superhero of rock and roll, a legend who soared beyond the pages of fiction and became an everlasting icon. He showed us that the greatest heroes aren't always found in the clouds or battling villains. Sometimes they're found on a stage, with a guitar in hand, a voice that could shake the heavens, and a heart full of the spirit of courage and imagination. And that truly is the heartwarming, captivating, and utterly intriguing story of Elvis, the everlasting hero.